It was a normal day when a student was rushing home after work, but today she was destined to die. Suddenly, a sharp sound of a horn, a truck, darkness, silence. The girl died to be born again, and now her heart belonged to another world. She is the only daughter of an influential duke in a fantasy kingdom where magic, knights, and noble intrigues reign. Her new name is Elizabeth Christian. She quickly realizes that she has not only a second life, but also great power, so she decides to take this chance to live with dignity, honesty, and love for people. Her relationship with her parents was good. Her servants treated her with respect and loved her. This life was different from the gray routine in which Elizabeth lived in her past life among the stone jungle of high-rise buildings. The girl is glad that she was reincarnated as the daughter of a duke, and not in the body of some thief or negative character. In that case, she would not have lasted long. In this life, she will enjoy everything. Every day was filled with positive emotions, and Elizabeth thought it was really cool to be born with a golden spoon and to be a wealthy person. There was a knock at the door. Elizabeth paid no attention to it. She thought the maid was coming to help her get ready for dinner. The girl suspected nothing. A half-naked stranger simply climbed into her bed while Elizabeth was unaware. The young man lay down next to her and kissed her. His lips touched the soft, velvety skin for only a moment. The chance was lost. Elizabeth jumped away from the stranger and asked what he was doing in her room and who he was to dare to do such a thing. But the young man didn't care. He leaned on his hands, but he wasn't about to get out of bed and let the duke's daughter go. Instead, he asked if she had any problems. Elizabeth asked him to go away and leave her alone. The young man immediately agreed and said that he would not bother her today, but that he was glad that she was feeling better. The stranger's tone made her think. She thought about how she couldn't remember what she usually did at night, and why the uninvited guest had treated her so openly and without ceremony. At dinner, the father noticed that something was wrong with his daughter. She was distracted and hardly participated in the conversation. The man asked his daughter what exactly was bothering and worrying her. Elizabeth could not answer and tell the truth. She realized that she knew little about the girl in whose body she found herself. Perhaps she was married and had a husband. The past was in a fog. The mother helped resolve the issue in her own way. The woman emphasized that her daughter was nervous before the wedding, and that it was normal. These words shed some light on the situation. Christian and his influential status would always stand behind her. The mother added that the prince himself had promised to let his wife visit her parents whenever she wanted, so they would see each other more often than they thought. Elizabeth could not understand what was happening. In the future, she was to become the prince's wife. But how then to explain the arrival of a stranger and his bold actions in the bed of the girl, the future princess? The same young man stood behind her. The girl felt uneasy in his presence. He was too close to her, and she could feel his breath on the back of her neck. After dinner, Elizabeth learned that he was her personal bodyguard. The duke's daughter could not believe that she was cheating on her future husband, the prince, with an ordinary bodyguard. The maid asked Milady why she was so worried. Did she not like the service? Elizabeth called her closer and asked if the guard had been visiting her bedroom at night for a long time. Lily, the servant, replied that this had been going on for about 2 years. This troubled the girl. It was difficult for her to understand how the duke's daughter must have suffered such a difficult fate for her to behave like this, and Lilia told about the first meeting and arrival at the house of Carsis, the boy whom the duke's daughter brought one evening. No one could even imagine what future awaited him. The boy grew up to be a real handsome man. He made a lot of efforts to be with Elizabeth all the time. He even became her personal bodyguard to be with her most of the time. Meanwhile, the young man was looking intently at the window in the duke's daughter's room. He saw that Lisa was still awake. Her behavior yesterday had been unusual. It seemed that the girl had been replaced. The girl, although she was the future wife of the crown prince, remained a popular favorite. The subjects were delighted with the duke's daughter. Many of the girls considered her their idol. Noble ladies also admired her. But there was one significant difference. The rich ladies envied the duke's daughter because she was popular among the commoners and the aristocracy. The girl understood that it was worth breaking off relations with Carsis. After all, this could prevent her from living such a blessed life in the future, full of simple joys and enjoyment of all available goods. One of the girls announced that an event that everyone had been waiting for so long was about to happen. Elizabeth thought about it. Again, a feeling of helplessness began to take hold of her, and she felt uncertain. The girls around them clearly perked up. It was clear that this previously unknown activity had brought a lot of pleasure and was enjoyed by noble ladies and their daughters. A crowd was already gathering at the stadium. People were discussing the fight that would soon take place. The main opponents would be a hungry, furious tiger and specially trained fighting dogs. Elizabeth, approaching the arena, saw a man holding a sword in his hands and preparing to fight his opponent. Poverty had driven him to such a state and forced him to risk his life. Lisa did not want to watch this cruelty. Her companion did not understand the change in her friend's character, because it was she who first suggested organizing this fight club and supplied the dogs for fighting. Thanks to this, the Duke's family had a good additional income, because the popularity of fighting led to a great demand for fighting dogs, which became a valuable commodity and were now in every wealthy family. The tiger attacked the man, and he could not resist the huge, angry animal, which clearly showed fighting qualities, and was doomed to death from the sharp, blade-like claws of the predator. The frenzied crowd watched the deadly duel as if spellbound. Some rejoiced that their bet on this fight would make them rich. Others simply eagerly awaited the bloody finale. The girl realized with horror that the battle was over. The animal had defeated its opponent, and the man lay torn apart at the predator's feet. And the dead man was called a fighting dog. The Duke's daughter was shocked by the cruelty that reigned around her. People easily bet money and played with other people's lives without the slightest remorse, calling them fighting dogs. Elizabeth's nerves could not stand it. She was running away from this terrible place, filled with pain and suffering. The girl tripped on the stairs and fell. She was disgusted to realize that she was to blame for all this. She was cold, as if ice had run through her skin. What had seemed like a flash of strength yesterday, today reeked of rot. Her face burned with shame, although no one directly rebuked her. But inside, something seemed to have broken. The disgust rising from within was like a black wave. It was more than shame. It was a deep, almost physical sense of her own ugliness. She hadn't just made a mistake, she had allowed herself to become a monster. She could no longer look people in the eye. Even the servants, those who had always bowed silently, now seemed silent witnesses to her disgrace. The arena, the blood, the screams, and then the void. The world froze, leaving her alone among the dust and dead bodies. Once it had seemed to her that power was the right to decide. Now she saw that it was a burden, and the blood on her hands could not be washed away by luxurious baths or jewels. A young man stood before her. Through the veil of tears and sobs that tried to escape from Elizabeth's throat, she recognized Carsus. He was silently and in surprise looking at the hostess. No one dared to speak. Finally, the servant asked why his mistress had not let him into the arena today. He asked for forgiveness if he had made a mistake or dared to offend the girl. Carsus was ready to suffer the punishment. The young man could not help himself. With a lightning-quick movement, he found himself at Milady's side and knelt before her, begging her not to punish him with silence. He was ready to do anything to earn her forgiveness. Carsus was kissing Elizabeth's leg. His lips were burning, and his kisses were so hot. The boy's eyes were closely following the girl's reaction, and he was ready to go to hell for her. Lisa realized that she had been mistaken in her expectations. The girl had not fallen into a romantic fantasy story. This was clearly an adult novel with a strict age restriction. As proof of this, Carsus held her leg and looked into her eyes like a faithful dog. The young man asked to be ordered around, and he was ready to obey his mistress's will as long as she was pleased. But the worst thing was that the girl realized the reasons for Carsus's determination and willingness to participate in gladiatorial battles. In this way, he tried to exalt the honor of his mistress. The crowd went wild at the sight of a young man in blood-stained clothes and with a sword in his hands, standing over the body of his opponent, a tiger, who was considered invincible on this square and was the embodiment of cruelty. Elizabeth was disgusted that she had agreed to let Carsus into the arena, but she simply could not do otherwise, because then suspicions would creep in that the girl was not who she claimed to be. The crowd parted before the young man, who was making his way to his mistress. From all sides came the congratulations of Lady Chrétienne. She should have been proud of this, but a strange excitement haunted her. Lisa couldn't just look at the fighter, who had suffered because of Fnr. She examined his wounds. The girl was going to call a doctor right away to provide first aid to the fighter. The people around froze. The Duke's daughter had never behaved in such a way. The young man deserved attention because he defeated Elena's tiger, but a noble lady cannot behave like this with her dog. The atmosphere around them became tense. Lisa's friend stepped forward and advised them to give the dog the opportunity to make one wish, which he had earned for his valiant victory over the tiger. The girl stood between the mistress and her dog. Lisa understood that no one saw anything human in this bloodied, tired young man. To everyone present, he was a fighting dog, a gladiator. He stood before her, the gladiator she had spared. His body was scarred, but his posture was erect, his eyes calm. He was a warrior, but now he looked quiet, almost vulnerable. Elizabeth asked the boy to say his cherished wish, and if she was able to fulfill it, the girl would do everything possible to ensure that Karsus received at least some joy in his difficult life. She was waiting for the usual: freedom, gold, the chance to leave the arenas forever. But instead, he looked up and said in a flat, firm voice that he wanted to stay with her forever. The boy knelt before his lady and said that he didn't need anything, but simply wanted to be with the girl despite all the troubles that might prevent this. She shuddered. The words fell on her like unexpected rain on a summer day, quietly but inevitably. Surprise flashed in her eyes, maybe even fear, or something else, deeper, more desperate. The Duke's daughter returned to her father's estate and drank wine. The girl tried to suppress the fear and anxiety inside her. She was worried that in this strange world, Lisa would not remain sane. Everything around her seemed crazy, not entirely rational. Added to all this were thoughts about her upcoming marriage. Instead of dreams of a promising future, it caused anxiety. Relations between the Duke and the Emperor's family were strained after the night of submission. But the marriage was supposed to smooth over the sharp edges in the relationship between two influential aristocratic dynasties. There was no question of love. Elizabeth wondered what her future fiancé might be like, having grown up in this crazy society. But the girl continued to drown her pain and guilt. The young man standing behind Lisa interrupted her thoughts. He talked about the battles, about how he had been absent from the arena and therefore had not seen the unfortunate slave's victory over the poor, hungry, angry animal. The young man seemed completely normal to Lisa. He continued to ask how the girl was feeling. The servants who witnessed this clearly did not like the conversation, but they did not dare to say anything. Finally, one of the servants said that he was glad to see His Highness the Prince. These words had a cold shower on the girl. The boy asked everyone to pay no attention and to act as if he were not there. The young man kissed Elizabeth on the cheek and said that the main reason for his visit was the desire to see his bride. This behavior of the monarch surprised and embarrassed the girl. Lisa could not remember anything about her past life, which was filled with all sorts of cruelty and things that the current daughter of a duke would be ashamed of. But she had chosen the right man. Karsus watched the couple from the garden through the large window. Surprise flashed in the young man's eyes, perhaps even fear, or something else, deeper and more terrible, which the boy himself was afraid of. Baroness Caroline, who had worked in the Emperor's palace for over 30 years, was very angry. The object of her fury was the future princess, the daughter of Duke Chrétien, and her dancing lessons. The girl asked her teacher if it was true that the future empress should be able to dance. After all, this could not affect her qualities in terms of married life, and could not in any way affect it. Elizabeth was tired. Her studies took place in the palace, and very often, after lessons, she felt very ill. Her dancing technique was terrible, and what was even more annoying was that she did not know the local alphabet. The servant who brought her the note immediately asked for a reply. Lisa could not read it and ordered the recipient to refuse, no matter what it was about. The servant was surprised and a little frightened. The girl understood that she should find out for herself what the former Elizabeth was doing before the current one entered her body. After all, if she really was a thief, then this could be life-threatening. Lisa came to the bookstore accompanied by her faithful bodyguard. The boy remained outside the door because the owner preferred to find what she was interested in on her own. The girl searched among the bookshelves for the information she needed. Over time, she realized that she perfectly understood the inscriptions on the spines of books and could read the titles and headings. Lisa wondered if she could now read the note from the mysterious stranger. To her surprise, she realized that she could not. So it was written in a strange language that was unknown even here. Her attention was drawn to a book with a title that indicated that the novel was for adults. This intrigued her because in this society, anything was to be expected. Behind her stood the prince. He asked if his bride had skipped a lesson for the future princess for such pleasure. Elizabeth felt embarrassed. She was confused and did not know what to say. The prince suggested that his beloved calm down and forget about the apology. Instead, he thought it would be worth running away secretly from everyone, and even the servants should not know about it. Such a proposal seemed strange. But in a few seconds, they were walking quickly down the street, and the girl was looking around in all directions. The prince asked her not to look back and not to attract attention. Soon they would pass through crowded places and be out of reach. The young man was pleased with his stroll through the city streets. He asked how his bride was doing. He was happy to spend time with her alone, away from public view. They noticed a boy begging on the edge of a drain. The prince threw him a handful of gold coins. The boy asked in surprise if the good man had made a mistake and would not demand the money back. After that, the lovers sailed on a boat through the city canals. The prince said that life had given him everything he could dream of. After all, he was born into the imperial family and became a hereditary prince just like that. What surprised Lisa even more was that the prince wanted to unite with the nobles who shared his views and supported him in order to reform the existing system in the country from the very bottom. To do this, it is worth establishing contacts with the nobility and aristocracy. Elizabeth could become a bridge between him and his future supporters. Thanks to her origin and the sympathy for her among society, Liza felt ashamed. She couldn't understand why the prince, who seemed to her to be a very kind and sweet young man, had found such a thing in her, as if he didn't know that she bred fighting dogs and didn't have fun with the guard at night. The prince approached the girl and was about to kiss her. She no longer heard his words about how together they would change people's lives for the better. Elizabeth felt her love for the young man. The water was agitated next to the boat. Something heavy hit right next to the side. The prince and his bride were confused, lost in guesses, but they soon realized that someone had thrown something heavy at them. A great crowd had gathered on the shore. They were all servants and subjects who were falling down to find the prince and Lady Elizabeth. At last, their search was crowned with success, and the people called to them to land on the shore. Lisa's bodyguard approached Ernst and ordered him not to do that again, because they had really scared everyone with their antics, and he ordered Lady Carsus to return home, to safety, and continue her lessons. In the carriage, the girl again remembered the mysterious note that she had not been able to read. Thoughts about the message mingled with thoughts that she was falling in love with the prince, and this was a real feeling. The prince, in turn, found a secret note. Its content caused a whole range of negative emotions. He was clearly not satisfied with what was written, and the name of his beloved bride fell from his lips. The girl was already in bed and reading a book when she remembered the note. She had lost it somewhere and could not find it. She did not attach much importance to it. Lisa began to guess in what language it was written. This strange language belonged to an ancient language that no one used anymore. If the girl managed to remember it, then next time she would be able to decipher what was written. Conjectures and doubts did not give her peace, and what worried her now was the fact that there was a person. Who could sneak into the palace and just deliver a note like that? If someone was capable of doing that, then they could do something worse and more dangerous. The maid pulled her out of her thoughts. She asked why the lady hadn't called Carsus to her for a long time. After all, before they could stay in the room for hours and have fun together, away from prying eyes. Lisa replied that something like this would never happen again. After all, she was soon to marry Prince Ernst. At the same time, she asked for help in finding a new prince to accompany and protect her. Lily clearly did not expect such a request. The girl could not believe what she heard. and the lady ordered to consider several candidates for the role of guards and knights. She had to remove the negative factor from her life. In the evening, it became known that the teddy bear, which had been given to Elizabeth by His Majesty the Prince, had disappeared. The servants, who were questioned, saw nothing and could do nothing to help. The search yielded nothing. Lisa came to her room. The bear was indeed gone, but the precious stone she had received as a gift remained. Any normal robber would have taken it first. Lilia reported that the toy had been found, but there was one moment that the lady would rather see with her own eyes, because the maid wouldn't dare talk about such things, so they both went to the garden where the bear was. Elizabeth was holding the teddy bear in her hands. It was all torn up. The girl found it hard to believe that it had been beaten up like that until she was informed. It was clear that the toy had been deliberately abused and torn. The Duke's daughter asked about the progress of the search for new knights. The girl already guessed who was to blame for the abduction of the bear and such barbaric abuse of it. Lisa saw that the cuts on the toy had been made with a very sharp blade. It was time to prepare a new guard for the palace. However, the candidates for Elizabeth's personal bodyguard were delayed on the way. Carsis's room very angry. She told him frankly that she suspected him of the crime he had committed, but she did not immediately see the young man, who was sitting on the floor and looked exhausted. The princess saw her servant sitting on the floor. He was holding his wounded hand. His body was covered in blood, and there was a mess around. Lisa asked what had happened and why he was in such a terrible state now. Carsis replied that it was difficult to remain calm when the Duke's knights were mocking you, and there was no other way to prove your honor and protect your lady's honor before others except with a good fight. Elizabeth understood that he was being bullied, so she offered him a room next to hers. But she was still naughty, and the girl would be glad to help the young man who had suffered because of her. The girl also thought that there were about 3 months left until the wedding. During that time, she should finally deal with Carsis and their relationship. In the meantime, she should keep the young man by her side. That was the end of their conversation. The girl turned and went to her room, leaving the young man alone with his thoughts. And Carsis actually had something to think about. The next morning turned out to be one of the best in a while. The girl didn't even notice that she had a headache, which happened quite often. She was comforted by the thought of transferring Carsis. The only thing to be careful of was that gossip and rumors might spread about this strange neighborhood of a fighting dog and his mistress. It was time for Lisa to find out where Carsis had come from. Elizabeth understood that the situation with the teddy bear was clearly his doing. The boy's perverted desire to be with his mistress had become the cause of his jealousy towards the girl and his attempts to gain her attention. The servant told her that Carsi was from the Republic of Brino. That was where the lady had found him. Lisa thought it would be a good idea to return him there before the gossip spread. Lady Rafflesia came to visit the prince. The young man enjoyed her company. The girl assured him that she had a serious conversation with His Majesty. The matter concerned his future bride, Lady Christian. Rafflesia spoke of the possible closeness between Elizabeth and her faithful dog. The extreme event was her order to move the vile gladiator closer to her room in the Duke's palace itself. The guest decided to inform before the gossip spread throughout the empire. The prince thought about it. This was a serious question because Lisa was soon to become his wife and empress. But the young man's anger fell on the guest herself, Lady Rafflesia. After all, she deliberately tried to spread gossip and rumors about his bride. The prince asked if she really wanted to make him jealous of the dog. So, if she tries to spread rumors further, she should definitely point out Ernst's own attitude to this issue. But that way, she could get in a lot of trouble for treason. Elizabeth has arrived in the capital for the celebration of the foundation of the empire. She is stopped by the carriage by Carsis, who insists that his mistress be on her guard, as it is dangerous for her in the city. The prince interrupted the conversation. He personally came out to greet the bride and escort her to the palace. In fact, the young man was interested in watching the reaction of the dog, who would be put in his place in this way. On top of all that, Ernst ordered Carsis to leave the capital, as from that day on, he was forbidden to visit the city. The lady could not understand where the groom had developed such an attitude towards the bodyguard. When the prince and Lisa were left alone, the young man asked if what was being said about her closeness to the dog and her attention to him was true. After all, Recently, many have been hinting at an unusual connection between them. The prince asked why she had done this to him. After all, even though they had been married more by contract, it did not prevent Ernst from loving her, and her rash act was a cruel blow to his heart. Lisa understood that His Majesty was beginning to be jealous of her. It was painful for her to realize this. After all, she did not want to play with the young man's feelings, and she did not want to hurt him and make him laugh in front of others. The girl knew that a classic plot in romance novels was a love triangle. The main character usually favored one of the two suitors, making the other jealous. Lisa was addicted to such love stories in her past life, but now that she encountered them in real life, it became very pleasant and sweet for her to look at her fiancé. The prince still looked intently into her eyes, trying to figure out how true the story was that had been told to him. Elizabeth wanted to enjoy Ernst's beauty and his sweet, jealous naivety, but it was worth explaining right now, because if events are allowed to develop on their own, there could be a tragic ending when one of the young men in love tries to destroy the enemy. Elizabeth asks the groom where he got such information from. After all, it is worth taking it seriously only when you receive it from a trusted person and have no doubts about it. Ernst talks about Rafflesia, who first came to him. The girl confesses that she did something unusual to the dog after that fight with the tiger, which was the reason for such gossip and lies. The girl also added that it would be difficult for her to find a better bodyguard, and the events of recent days convincingly showed that someone was trying in every way to harm her or intimidate the poor thing. The prince asked if it was justified to move the fighting dog closer to his room. Lisa warned that the groom's suspicions offended her and humiliated both her honor and his personally in front of others. The duke's daughter warned that a quarrel between them would bring great joy to their common enemies, and it would also hinder the prince's own cause, which he had spoken frankly to her about in the boat. Elizabeth added that the young man was just her bodyguard, and there was nothing more between them. She couldn't even think of comparing the prince to anyone. After all, he was not only very handsome. In her eyes, he possessed outstanding human virtues, so there was no need to worry about these rumors. It was just that next time it was necessary to punish anyone who came to His Majesty with a similar appeal. Lisa promised that immediately after their marriage, when she felt safe with her husband, she would send a bodyguard to his homeland and pay attention only to Ernst. The girl said that she was very sorry, because she had made the prince listen to such a lie that humiliated him and her feelings. But nothing like that could stand in the way of their love and common cause. Meanwhile, Karsus witnessed the arrival at the palace of Viscount Goff, ruler of the lands where the duke's daughter's bodyguard was born. The young man now recalled the events of the day when Ellie had found him and offered a helping hand. Karsus was distracted from further thoughts by the appearance of a girl who called herself Deborah. She turned out to be a pleasant conversationalist, and the young man was distracted from his sad thoughts and forgot about Goff for a while. In the garden, Elizabeth and Ernst met His Majesty the Emperor. The man was playing with a cat. The Emperor told them of his suspicion that the animal had been attacked by his pet monkey. His Majesty turned out to be actually very kind and loving, as he paid attention to an ordinary cat, which he tried to treat and help put on its feet. Elizabeth was surprised by this. The girl understood that a crazy society that treated violence and cruelty so easily could be reformed by the efforts of these two influential men. Together, they would defeat the party of aristocrats. Elizabeth left the company of the groom and his father. She was still thinking about how easily gossip spread in the imperial palace when she saw Karsus and the unknown girl beside him. Deborah greeted Elizabeth with a smile and said she was very happy to see her here. The duke's daughter couldn't remember where she knew her from, but she was even more curious about the relationship the guard had with the stranger. They seemed to be quite close people. Meanwhile, Deborah asked if she could ask the lady for a certain favor during the celebration of the founding of the empire. The stranger asked to be allowed to stay in Lisa's father's palace because she was a stranger here and completely alone. Under such conditions, someone could take advantage of her defenselessness and commit a crime against her. Elizabeth thought that this girl approached her so easily and was on good terms with Karsus, so she did not dare to refuse her and happily promised her shelter and protection from danger. After these words, Devor and the young man smiled. Lisa thought that something was clearly wrong with her, and it was worth somehow establishing the true nature of the relationship between the guard and this stranger. In the carriage, the girl talked to Elizabeth. The guest talked about her desire to live in the capital because then they could see each other more often. However, her illness would interfere even in that case. Lisa was nervous. She couldn't feel normal because she didn't know anything about her friend. Devora looked like the daughter of an aristocrat, but her attitude towards Elizabeth and Carsus put her in an awkward situation. Devora suddenly emphasized that the book the Duke's daughter had wanted to buy last time had been brought to the castle of Novache. After that, Lisa began to remember something. The memories came together like a puzzle. The girl turned out to be the daughter of one of the most influential and wealthy ducal families in the north of the empire. Deborah Oroge was distinguished by her poor health and her passion for books. Viscount Goff stood before His Majesty the Emperor. The Emperor asked how things were in the ruling house of Brino. The latter replied that recently children had often disappeared from his master's possessions. The Emperor asked how this was happening. Goff said that everyone suspected in this case new fashion trends spreading from the capital through the efforts of one influential family. Elizabeth and her groom were learning to dance their wedding waltz. The governess was driven mad by the young couple's clumsiness. They could not repeat more than 2 movements, and it drove her mad. Ernst noticed that his fiancée was too distracted from the dance today. The girl asked for her forgiveness. She could not tell what she thought about the northern lands of the empire and the parents of her friend Devora. The girl from the house of Alraj was the heiress to her parents' estates. But most of all, Elizabeth wondered why the guest had left Carsus's room so early this morning. A solemn reception in honor of the day of the founding of the empire began. His Majesty received guests from all corners of the state and paid attention to everyone who addressed him with a greeting or request. Elizabeth, together with the prince, greeted the guests. It gave her no pleasure, because the girl was tired of smiling and playing nice with all these people. Right now, Lisa would prefer to be left alone. Ernst took the bride out into the garden and suggested a break from the festivities and ceremonial. He could only guess how the girl was really feeling and how tired she might have been from the evening. Elizabeth's attention was drawn to Carsus and Lady Deborah. The two were having a great time and enjoying themselves. The Duke's daughter tried to calm herself down and adjust to the order in which she should be equal. Besides, there were many things to worry about first and foremost. For example, preparing for the wedding dance. The girl could not embarrass herself in front of the provincial aristocracy and guests. However, Lisa's thoughts returned to her guard and guest. The girl had suffered from a serious illness all her life, which often confined her to bed and forced her to sit at home alone. The logical question arose: how did Devora meet Carsus, and what plans did the girl have for this young man? After all, he would soon be leaving for his homeland to avoid quarrels with Ernst. In the garden, girls from noble families discussed the reception of the emperor and his son. Everyone agreed that these two should bring prosperity and development to the land of their subjects. Devora, who everyone knew had stayed at Duke Crestian's palace for the celebration, approached the group. The girls quickly began to ask her if the gossip about Lisa and her bodyguard was true. Elizabeth, standing behind the hedge, heard the ladies' question perfectly. They wondered if the Duke's daughter really invited her faithful war dog into her bedroom every night and stayed with him until morning. Devora told me that the guard's room was actually next to his mistress's. However, he was not as popular as everyone around him said, and she had never noticed anything like that. To top it all off, she told the guest that she had spent the night in Carsus's room, and when Elizabeth met her in the morning, she hadn't said anything to her. Well, it's not worth gossiping about something that didn't really exist. The girl explained that in her native land, the climate is very harsh, and it is very difficult to have fun. And in the capital, it is customary to breed dogs, so she personally studies a fighting dog in order to take it with her. Elizabeth hung on every word Lady Deborah said. The Duke's daughter didn't want to give her dog to this girl, and the very thought of it caused a lot of negative emotions in the guest. Lisa quickly returned home. She ordered the maid to prepare a bath as she went. She wanted to wash away everything she had heard and felt that day. The maid tried to stop her. The Duke's daughter understood the maid's reaction. In the bathroom was Carsus. He was drying his wet body after taking a bath, and Lisa could see his gorgeous body and the scars on it. But she was even more surprised when she saw Lady Devora, in a towel, standing next to the young man. The girl was holding the dog by the hand and hugging him. The guest asked for forgiveness for her appearance. Lisa sat alone in a dark room. She tried to calm herself, but her thoughts would not let her rest. What bothered her most was that Karsus had turned out to be unfaithful to her alone. He had a new toy for her to play with. The maid was ordered by the mistress to bring the aromatic oils that Elizabeth loved this evening. The girl was surprised, because the mistress had not done anything like this for a long time. Karsus to her bedroom. The Duke's daughter was not going to give herself to a fighting dog. She wanted to give the young man a chance to leave her and start a new life, without memories and regrets. The guard arrived in a moment. He sat down in front of his mistress and asked to be given orders. The girl replied that she had not called him for that, but simply wanted to talk to him. Elizabeth carefully examined the guest. He was handsome, with a well-developed body. It was clear that Devora could not help but like him. After all, the poor thing had never seen anything like it in her entire life. The owner asked what the dog thought about going to Lady Devora's family estate. After all, this way they could be together. No one there knew about his past, or who he was here. Lisa added that it seemed to her that they were having a good time. And Deborah herself was a very enviable bride, with many possessions and the title of Duchess. Karsus asked if the lady was really jealous of him. Elizabeth jumped up. She was clearly nervous, so the words that it was nonsense didn't seem very true. The girl calmed down and asked how the relationship between Deborah and the guard began. The young man was angry. He stood in front of the landlady and told her that on the day when Deborah first appeared in his room, it was Elizabeth who initiated it. It is not clear what was controlling her then. Before that, the girl had ordered Karsus to make friends with her friend and entertain her a little. It was on her orders that the boy became close to Lady Deborah. He felt used. Karsus approached Lisa and held out his hand to her. The boy said that even if she told him to leave, he would think about her all the time, but he wouldn't dare remind her of himself. The guard asked to be allowed to kiss his mistress. The girl could not refuse him. Elizabeth thought that she did not want to offend him, and even more so did not want to make it clear that she did not love him. Deborah clenched her fists and was furious. She knew the gossip was true. She was hurt that Karsus had chosen Lisa over her. The desire for revenge overwhelmed the girl. In the morning, Elizabeth met her fiancé. She looked worried. Ernst thought that the reason for this was her fear of dancing in public. The prince promised to support her and help her. The Duke's daughter thought that she had a secret from her fiancé. Viscount Goff was coming to meet her. The girl did not like this man. For some reason, she remembered Karsus's warning about the danger. Goff kissed Elizabeth's hand and introduced himself. His touch was unpleasant, and the girl would have preferred to avoid his company at all costs. The guest's friendliness should have been deceptive, but Lisa saw right through him. The prince, meanwhile, said that the Viscount helped people with mental disabilities. He had a special house on his estate where they all lived and had shelter without any discrimination. Elizabeth could not believe that this kind man, who cared for the needy, could be as dangerous as the guard had warned her. Ernst also treated him with dignity and friendliness. Lisa assured Goff that she would look into the matter of helping his home and the asylum for the infirm in her free time. He replied that he would be very grateful for that. The prince was pleased with the acquaintance. Ernst thanked the guest and assured him that he and his bride should go back to their dancing lessons. They were still not doing very well, and Elizabeth was nervous and worried about it. Goff bowed and held out his hand to Lisa. He asked to be allowed one dance with the girl. Perhaps he could give her some good, useful advice. The prince's bride did not want to do this. The man spent the entire dance talking about how he treated his charges. He considered them almost his own children. Among them were those who were better than many aristocrats and nobles from the palace. Suddenly, the guest's behavior changed. He squeezed the girl's hand tightly, which hurt. Goff said that once a child from a rich family robbed him. At that time, he had a boy whom the guardian valued very much. The girl took the little boy, kidnapping him directly from the castle dungeon. After that, for many years, Goff tried to find the kidnapper and the boy, who must have already been a young man. Finally, the search was successful. After searching the entire empire, the guardian tracked down the thief. Finally, right now, he had the opportunity to look her in the eye and ask how she felt after that evening, and if she thought of him often. Elizabeth calls the precious boy Carsus and reduces him to the status of a fighting dog. It was humiliating for a young man with his gifts and talents, but soon everything will fall into place. Elizabeth remembered when she had called her guard by name. It was in the basement, sitting behind bars, that Carsus had received his new name. That event was etched in the girl's mind, but before that she had not remembered it. The Duke's daughter woke up in her bed. Next to her lay naked Carsus. The girl could not remember how it had come to this and what had happened between her and the young man that evening. She was afraid to confess to herself. The young man woke up. He wanted to kiss the lady, but she moved away from him and covered his mouth with her hand. She ordered him to pack up and go to his room before anyone noticed. Outside the door, in the hallway, stood Lady Devora. She watched the couple and reported that she had witnessed everything that had happened, and the girl was disappointed that the gossip had turned out to be true. At breakfast, Lisa caught strange glances from the guests. The girl was ashamed that on the eve of her wedding to the prince, she had committed such a stupid act. Elizabeth had slept with her bodyguard. Devora said she was very sorry that she wouldn't get Carsus for herself. After all, she had been hoping for it all this time. After all, even when she spent time with him, Lisa had nothing against it. The guest reassured the Duke's daughter that she would not tell anyone anything. The gossip would not receive new food for its spread. Deborah herself intended to go home as soon as possible, but she added that when the day came when Lisa would play with Carsus, she should definitely send him to her in the northern lands. Deborah's would gladly shelter him and make him her own. Elizabeth thought that she would not do that. After all, the young man was with Deborah only because of her order, not of his own free will. But she definitely would not talk about it. And she would not send him to his homeland either. The governess praised her pupil. The dance was a great success, and the speech before the aristocracy and guests was worthy of any praise. Elizabeth really tried very hard. Elizabeth was delighted with the praise, but something frightened her. She could not remember anything at all about the events of the previous evening. It turned out that the Viscount had done something to her that had caused partial amnesia. Ernst answered her question that he was angry with her. He had a strong impression that his fiancée had also begun to get closer to the Viscount. Everyone around was gossiping about her. Added to all this was the note that the prince had found. Its contents did not inspire optimism in him, but he would have preferred to remain silent and not raise the subject. Someone knocked on the door and interrupted the conversation at an interesting moment. The servants reported the disappearance of Viscount Goff. He had not been seen since yesterday evening. No one had seen him and could say anything definite about the matter. Lisa saw horsemen galloping down the street. They had been sent to search every nook and cranny of the estate and the city. The disappearance or death of the Viscount could cause a political scandal, so it was worth hurrying. The prince remembered where he had ended his conversation with his bride. His attention was drawn to a message written in an ancient, forgotten language spoken by a few. It contained an order to kill Goff. The servants found the Viscount's body in the woods, near the royal park. There were no signs of struggle or violence on the nobleman's body. It was determined that he had died suddenly of cardiac arrest. Later, the doctor informed the prince that Goff had drowned. It was possible that it was a planned suicide, but a man like the Viscount had no problems with wealth and money, so that must have been the reason. But the murder theory could not be dismissed. The prince wondered whether to continue the investigation, which was to establish the cause of death. Ernst was afraid of framing Elizabeth. The girl, meanwhile, pondered what had happened that evening between her and Viscount Goff. Elizabeth suspected that at that moment the true daughter of the Duke of Chrétien might have awakened within her. That evening was amazing for her. The governess said that she had not seen her mistress like this for a long time. The speech and the dance were simply perfect. The teacher was proud of the girl in whom she had invested so much time. But even more surprising were the gifts that the future princess gave out. Girls from noble families were very grateful for the small precious jewelry and perfumes from Lady Elizabeth. But those guests who had gossiped and spread rumors behind Lisa's back the day before were especially surprised. She was given dead snakes with their tongues cut off. This was a warning not to talk too much. At dinner, Ernst praised his companion for a good evening and her truly royal manners. But suddenly, he emphasized that it was time to finally get rid of the trained dog. The girl understood her fiancé's feelings. After all, everyone already knew that the gladiator's and his mistress's rooms were next to each other. Lisa still couldn't send him to the order, where he would be mocked again. The young man already had to defend his own existence against other boys who considered themselves better than a vile slave who was forced to compete in the arena like a wild beast. The girl saw a crowd of young men gathered around something or someone. She immediately understood that Karsus was going to be beaten there. But as she pushed through the crowd screaming, she was surprised. Karsus held a sword in his hands, the blade dripping blood. One of the attackers knelt before him. Although it was a routine training exercise, the guard took his job seriously. The mentor of the young warriors, during a conversation with the girl, stated that no one would dare to mock Karsus. After all, he becomes extremely aggressive and uncontrollable at the slightest insult. Elizabeth was thinking about what to do with the guard. He was clearly in love with her. The incident with the cut teddy bear proved his obsession with her. After all, the ribbon he had given her had not been damaged then. Meanwhile, the prince came to the morgue, where the Viscount's body lay. Ernst ordered the investigation to be stopped. He ordered that what had happened be considered a suicide. He did this for the safety of the princess. The assistant investigator received an order from His Majesty to burn the body so that not even a trace of it would remain. The case could not be made public, and he would handle the international scandal on his own. The emperor, on the last day of the Foundation Day celebrations, delivered a speech over the Viscount's body. He stressed that this was a huge tragedy for everyone, but Goff had decided to settle accounts with his life in this way. But soon everything returned to its place. Lady Elizabeth's awkwardness in dancing also returned. The prince looked at her in surprise, because then at the ball in front of him was a completely different person, skilled in dancing. Christian awoke in her. Her spirit took over the girl's body, and she did many things for which she was still ashamed, including the night spent with the guard. The bride was leaving the hall, and the boy inside. Ernst was surprised by such a sudden change in the girl's behavior and mood. He wanted to clarify everything for himself and put things in their proper place, especially after the note. A group of boys approached Lisa. They asked her to listen to them and help them, because soon she would become a princess and would be able to influence some issues in the lives of her subjects. They were talking about Karsus. The petitioners emphasized that recently the young man had become completely dissolute. It had become difficult to control him, and in turn he paid no attention to anyone. And the fact that they were now severely beaten was also his merit. The guys asked to punish or somehow influence Lisa's bodyguard. After all, the further he goes, the worse he behaves. The girl could not believe that it was not Karsus, but that he would insult everyone. Milady summoned the guard to her for a conversation. The girl was curious about what he was hiding from her. After all, it was clear that in public he was a completely different person, different from what he was now, and was with her constantly. She waited for him in the west wing of the castle, in the abandoned pavilion where she usually hid from her duties. His footsteps sounded evenly, with the same calmness that had previously instilled in her a sense of protection. Lisa asked if he really thought he was being held by muscle alone. The lady's eyes sparkled. She added that Karsus was her shield, her friend, the only one she trusted when everyone else was a mask. And now he was behaving like a beast. The lady ordered him to apologize to those he had offended and beaten, and thereby prove his humanity and willingness to embark on the path of justification. After all, he was a man, not a beast with a sword. The young man leaned over to Lisa and asked why after that day she didn't come to him or call him. He was tired of being treated like a toy and having his feelings played with. And now, on top of everything, she's trying to blame him for something he didn't do, just by believing other people's words. So what's their relationship worth in that case? Lisa assured me that she saw everything herself. In her opinion, he crossed the line. But Karsus is convinced that the opposite is true. It was the attackers who allowed themselves a lot of unnecessary things, and Elizabeth is simply trying to get rid of it. The Duke's daughter asked if he had done that to the bear. The young man stood silently. By his silence, he had given himself away and confessed. The enraged Lisa ordered him to simply practice and nothing more. First, he will be transferred to a separate room in an annex to the main building. He will be held there under arrest for a period of time, and he is forbidden to leave the premises or the boundaries of his residence. Elizabeth and her fiancé visited the late Goff's estate. The shelter manager welcomed the guests and emphasized that it was a great honor for both him and the animals. The manager, whose name was Chad, said that this shelter was considered the largest in the empire. Orphans and fatherless girls flock to the shelter from all over the country and are given a roof over their heads. The princess asked if it was difficult to maintain and run the shelter. Chad replied that it was difficult to do it on the funds of one viscount. However, with the support of sponsors, it was possible to keep up. The manager told about the colossal amount of help from the emperor. He allocated huge amounts of money to help orphans because he valued even the smallest life and considered it valuable. Ernst said that he would also support the shelter and help it. The girl was once again ashamed of her behavior and betrayal with an ordinary guard. In this world, the prince and his father were the most adequate. The children, the pupils of the institution, carefully examined the princess and her fiancé. They did not give the impression of being in need of anything. Their clothes were in poor condition, and the children themselves were thin. Chad ordered the children to get away and not to disturb them, but Ernst ordered them to come closer to him and talk to them. The prince calmed Chad down and said that he understood everything. In the evening, the couple strolled around the palace. The prince thanked his bride for the trip together because he could only guess how difficult and dangerous it was for her. Lisa, on the other hand, thanked him for the trip. She emphasized that she enjoyed spending time with her fiancé, and this trip would bring them even closer, because they were here even without security. But Ernst thought he should be the one to thank. After all, the news of their joint trip would soon spread throughout the empire, especially the capital. Then the aristocracy would pay more attention to such shelters for orphans and the homeless. The young man thanked Lisa for helping him reform the system from the bottom up. He was fed up with the cruel aristocratic model of morality and behavior in the society of the nobility. The guy also emphasized that they would soon become a role model for young couples and draw attention to the social problems of the state. However, Lisa's motives were much more noble and lofty. Her heel broke off. The prince, without hesitation, sat down in front of her and offered to climb onto his shoulder. He would carry his beloved to her room, and then they could continue their conversation in a more suitable place. On Ernst's back, the girl thought about the fact that she had come to Bryn in order to establish what had happened between the late Viscount and Carsus, and whether her bodyguard had any relatives here. After she finds someone from Carsus's relatives, she will send him here, and she herself will start a normal life, as a princess married to such a kind and sensitive monarch should do. Elizabeth whispered in Ernst's ear that he would become a good emperor and a worthy ruler, who would always be remembered only for his good deeds. The girl promised to be his support and confidant. Carsus was sitting in his room. After he was evicted from the main house, the young man began to be bullied with renewed vigor. And now, behind the wall, the screams and boastful exclamations of those he had insulted could be heard. A young man in white clothes entered Lisa's bodyguard's room. The guest asked what had caused his expulsion from the main palace. Had Carsus failed to satisfy the demanding lady this time? A servant stood outside Elizabeth's room, assuring her that the young lady was still asleep. The prince promised that he would not disturb her for no reason, but would simply look at her while the bride slept. The young man sat down on the bed next to his beloved and mentally thanked her for her support and belief in his cause. The girl would become the closest person to him with whom he could consult and talk frankly. The war with the barbarian tribes will soon end, and then his main goal will be to raise the level of culture and economy so that the population can afford a normal standard of living. In order for the prince to always have a faithful and reliable support in the person of his wife, it was decided to choose one of the girls from the 3 noble families of the dukes for this role. That is how Lisa became the favorite. In essence, the future marriage was to be a union formed simply by the emperor's own choice. However, the prince felt a tender feeling arising within him, and Lisa became close to him. The young man continued to stroke her and caress her hair and neck while Elizabeth slept. The girl, half asleep, thought it was Carsus and called him by name. This made the prince recoil from her. Enraged, Ernst jumped out of bed and promised himself to help the girl forget about her lover. He was to disappear from their lives like smoke, like fog in the morning. A faithful dog must leave its mistress. In the morning, the maid informed the lady that the prince had gone for a checkup and had left her a small gift. The girl wondered what it could be. The gift turned out to be an adult novel about betrayal. Elizabeth was confused. Ernie left her a gift with a hidden meaning, and he himself, accompanied by loyal soldiers, set off to inspect the territories of the late Viscount's possessions. He gave her time to think, but in reality, it was a chance for the girl to familiarize herself with all the records about the orphanage that Chad had prepared for her. Elizabeth instilled in him confidence and promised to help the orphans in every way possible. Lisa planned to find out how Karsus ended up in this shelter and whether the boy had any relatives or friends. But it turned out that the archives did not list the names of the children and their physical characteristics. Chad replied that they usually just wrote down the sex and age of the pet. Lisa thought that she would definitely not find Karsus that way. The manager noticed her confusion and asked if she was really looking for someone. The future princess suddenly asked if there had been a boy of his age with extraordinary abilities, to whom the late Viscount had a special relationship, and whom he might have remembered. Chad suggested she follow him. The man told her not to be afraid. He would lead her a little further into the yard, where the usual visitors did not go. There was a special house there, which was now empty. The manager asked not to be afraid. He would just show the catalog. The girl did not immediately understand what he was talking about. Among the children were special ones, who were being trained for future fights and competitions in the arenas. Chad promised that he would personally help select those in whom the princess showed interest. The man said that he would give the appropriate order to deliver the selected children to Mrs. Elizabeth's address. The girl figured out the reason why the Viscount was angry at that time and why he accused her of kidnapping a child from his estate. He collected children in a shelter and trained them as fighting dogs. But that wasn't even what shocked her more. Lisa recognized these places. She had been here before. It was the first time the girl had allowed herself to take a boy from this shelter who had eventually turned into a fighting dog. After their stay in Breener, Ernst and his fiancée returned to the capital. The girl actually became closer to her fiancé. Although he was offended by her relationship with Karsus, he decided everything for himself. While the royal couple was in the neighboring province, something important happened in the capital. Count Roman and Marquis Wright had a falling out over being in love with the same girl. This led to a deadly duel in which both men died. From that time on, many aristocrats introduced a new fashion of replacing duels with dogfights between rival fighters. But lately, it has become difficult to find a decent fighting dog. And this happened because Lisa no longer supplied this product to high society. Therefore, many were forced to fight in duels. The girl remembered how they tried to sell her children in Brenner. Then she tactfully refused. Perhaps she should have bought all the children and saved their lives. After all, someone would do it for her. Only then would the children be trained and turned into mere animals to be killed. A thought arose within him that it would be worth returning to Goff's estate and taking the children away. The girl decided to visit her fighting dog. He obediently followed her orders not to leave his room. It was worth waiting for any reception. The boy was not in very good shape. In this state, he really looked like a fighting dog. Karsus said that he was glad to see her and that she was coming towards him. The young man heard from afar, following her footsteps. Her thoughts began to wander. Her head spun, and Lisa could barely stand on her feet. The world around her spun, and she found herself alone in the room of the fighting dog, whom she had been disdainful of lately. Karsus's room. He asked for forgiveness, but he dared to take off her corset and put her in his bed. The girl asked what was happening to her. The young man ordered her not to move and brought water for her himself. The girl thought that the little boy she had taken Karsus from had grown over the years into such a handsome, strong man who seduced with his manners. The crown prince, meanwhile, was choosing a gift for his bride. He didn't intend to take something banal, but his advisor asked if a child from an orphanage would be a good gift for milady. This made His Majesty think again about all the gossip about Lisa. Many people continued to say that the Duchess's dog did not know its place, and she did not want to take him anywhere. Moreover, she recently assured him that dogfighting also carries a lot of positivity. After all, such shows bring together the aristocratic public and reduce the level of violence among the population itself. If they were to be eradicated, it would have to be done carefully and gradually. There were moments that gave rise to doubts in the young man's mind. However, he decided for himself to continue to trust Elizabeth. In Carsis's house, the guard had undressed and was already standing over the princess. He promised that he would now help her relax and forget about the unsuccessful trip. After all, no one was supposed to disturb their peace. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the forbidden desire that had been building up all these days. From memories, how he looked at her during training, how he held her hand when she felt sick, the nights they had spent together. Now Karsus resembled a well-trained Doberman, consciously striving to possess his victim. The girl did not want to give up intimacy with him. Emotions took precedence over duty. Her breathing slowed. She didn't stop him when he rose. She didn't pull her hand away when he touched her fingers. His touch was warm, rough, real, and when his lips touched her temple, she didn't pull away. The young man's movements seemed so gentle and at the same time skillful. The girl's body was accustomed to his caresses. They spent many nights together, and she simply could not deny herself the pleasure of making love. The voice of reason won. Lisa changed instantly. She ordered them to get off her and get out of bed. The girl was worried that no one would see anything through the window. She didn't want any more gossip. She had already dressed and was about to leave the room when, with a lightning movement, Karsus was behind her and closed the door with his hand. The young man asked to come more often. After all, from now on, he would remain just her dog. Guest Elizabeth asked the girl if she thought her dog was trying too hard to get into places where a normal dog shouldn't. The girl assured her that wasn't the case. Elizabeth had already heard once again about the reduction in the supply of fighting dogs, and that from that moment on, owners began to treat them more carefully. After all, buying a new one is now an unaffordable luxury. But this has in turn caused some disobedience from the dogs, who have realized their importance and that they will not be punished severely because of their high price. Many are thinking about new supply channels. Goff's orphanage. The Duke's daughter replied that she was not concerned about the resumption of supplies. After all her attention was now focused on preparing for the wedding. But the interlocutor interrupted her and informed her that an auction was taking place right now. It is attended by aristocratic families who have decided to seize the niche previously occupied in the dog trade by the Creston family and its friends. It is worth thinking about the future of Elizabeth. The girl knew perfectly well that this would cause irreparable damage to her family and their status among the aristocracy, and her marriage to the crown prince would suffer from this, so it's worth visiting the auction. When she came to the auction, everyone around was very surprised. They had not seen the lady in such places for a long time, and they were saying that she had given up this business for love. Well, it is worth making it clear that the gossips were lying. Elizabeth Ernst thought that after their visit to the orphanage, the aristocrats would pay more attention to such places. But it turned out that they were only interested in children as fighting dogs. At the auction, she met Lady Devora. The girl told me that it was very difficult for her to come here, but after overcoming her feelings of shame, she still wanted to buy a dog. Faithful like Karsus, Lady Devora no longer seemed like that sweet girl. She was actually the embodiment of pure evil. All she thought about was satisfying her animal instincts and desires. Elizabeth was once again convinced that she couldn't just give Karsus to this crazy girl. So, she should avoid talking about him and not give anyone a reason to talk about his eviction. Lisa thought about the fact that up until that moment, she had simply considered him a fighting dog. But the boy's behavior in the room indicated that he also had feelings and was trying to adequately express them. However, each time he ran into a wall of misunderstanding. Society was not ready for reform until the attitude towards dogs as an inferior race, as many aristocrats believed, was eradicated. One of the guests approached the man who was selling the goods, and the guest assured him that all the dogs were actually defective. The problem was that each of the dogs wanted to kill its owner, but failed. The community was excited. Everyone wanted to hear from Mrs. Larpage, who had organized this auction. After all, with her thoughtless act, she was putting everyone in danger. The dog could have gone crazy at home and caused a lot of trouble. Larpage stepped forward and said that all dogs are actually problem dogs. However, there was one characteristic. But now they are not like that. They have been retrained. They have been put through an obedience program. And everything was done the same way as it was done in the past with Lady Elizabeth's faithful fighting dog. He was handled by a prominent metropolitan trainer named Isaac, and he was personally present at the auction. Lisa looked at the man standing in front of her in surprise. This man was training Karsus. The guests were whispering and talking behind his back, thinking that he was actually some kind of charlatan. Isaac turned to two respected aristocrats who confirmed that he was by no means a charlatan and that the gentleman was quite pleasant to deal with. In addition, he had discovered a new sea route, but until now, they had never heard that. In addition to all his talents, the man trained fighting dogs. Isaac was not at a loss. He offered a little presentation. The trainer sat the dog on a chair and pulled a bag over its head. Then he began pouring a strange liquid on the dog's hair and face, ordering it not to breathe anymore. Everyone watched this action as if spellbound. The dog obediently waited for Isaac to cancel the command. But the man was in no hurry with this. He informed everyone that the dog was not even tied to the chair. Everyone around was shocked by the result of the training. The subject began to suffocate. Many of the ladies who were more vulnerable began to ask to stop the experiment. The trainer continued the demonstration until the last, and finally stopped. The fighting dog fell to the floor in the middle of the hall. The guests said that he held his breath until the last. If the noble ladies had not interceded for him, he might even have died. Only Karsus had ever seen such a thing. But now many could become the owner of such a masterpiece. Isaac asked if anyone in the audience still doubted his talent and methods of upbringing. The guests crowded around the man and asked him when he had learned the talent of a trainer. After all, he should have been doing this a long time ago, because he had trained Karsus, who was at that age. The auctioneer asked for a moment of attention. She informed everyone that from that moment on, all the dogs had been sold. However, there was no need to be upset for those who did not get a pet. In the future, it is planned to establish a steady flow of fighting dogs for all who wish. Lady Saffridge and Isaac will personally work on this and provide worthy material for all who wish. For some reason, the girl didn't like the words about the next auction. She wasn't used to someone other than her trading in live goods, but now it was disgusting to watch it. After all, human life was not valued at all. Elizabeth watched what was happening around her. A lot of money had been invested in organizing the banquet and reception. The girl wondered if it was possible to reform such a society. After all, the aristocracy was only interested in fighting dogs and how to show off their purchased goods to each other. The appearance of Isaac tore them from their thoughts. Now he did not give the impression of a scoundrel. The conversation never got going, and the girl congratulated the trainer on the successful sale of all the fighting dogs. He modestly replied that his contribution to this was minimal. The man emphasized that he learned all the training and coaching techniques from her personally. With this, Isaac raised another fundamental question for Lisa: what kind of relationship they had in the past. The coach also asked if it was true that she and the prince had recently visited Viscount Gough's orphanage. The girl replied that they were only interested in the order and affairs of the orphanage, but the husband did not believe her. He said that in reality, everyone knew perfectly well the main secret, the main purpose of the shelter. It was a potential breeding ground for fighting dogs. Children are much easier to train. Isaac asked if the girl really wanted wealth and fame so much that she was willing to turn children into merchandise that would eventually die in the arena or on the training ground. The man emphasized that he would not give up his place in such a serious business. He advised the girl to train future dogs using the carrot and stick method. The result would be more noticeable. Elizabeth asked him if it was true what they said about his path to the top of society, that Isaac himself was a commoner who managed to get rich and advance, both rightly and wrongly. But he assured me that he knew far more about fighting and training warriors than anyone in this room or outside it. His experience could not be conveyed even in a year or two. Isaac paused and added that he knew all about training and preparation methods, having once been a fighting dog. He managed to gain his freedom and decided that he would become a trainer and educator. Finally, he advised her not to eat peanut ice cream anymore. The girl didn't understand what this was about, but she refrained from comments and questions, and the man left her alone with her thoughts. In the morning, the maid warned her not to even try the peanut ice cream, because the lady is allergic to it, and last time she barely managed to save her from a seizure after eating these sweets. Lilia asked why her mistress had become so inattentive. She clearly wasn't like that before. And the closer the wedding got, the more she began to forget or react uncharacteristically. Elizabeth went to the port docks. She tried to hide the fact that she was a girl, but nothing could be hidden from the watchful eyes of the workers. Jokes rained down from everywhere about the purpose of the stranger's search. The young man offered to help such a beautiful lady. The help was related to the fact that the girl had come to sell her honor and love for money. In this, he was definitely ready to be the first. Isaac stood behind the young man. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder and ordered him not to be rude to the guests. At the same time, he asked for forgiveness for his impudence and rudeness, which he dared to show to the noble lady. The trainer and the young lady walked into the cabin. The man asked if she had really undertaken such a dangerous adventure just to find him for a serious conversation. Elizabeth decided to reveal all the cards at once. She said she had come for help. After all, Isaac knew a lot that she didn't. Behind the wall was Karsus, which Lisa had no idea about. The girl said that she had been feeling unwell lately. She had become a little clumsy and inattentive. This worried her, but what worried her even more was that she could hardly remember anything from the past. Lisa thought that Az himself had noticed this behind her, so there was no point in trying to hide it from him in order to be able to get help. So she tried to establish communication. Elizabeth began to say that she would never have thought that the man, who came from the bottom and was a former war dog, would have achieved such heights. But he assured her that she definitely did not come for compliments. The girl replied that she wanted to set Karsus free, and she needed Isaac's help in this. After all, he was a respected person in society, and when he sold slaves, he could do the opposite. Lisa asked to help her guard learn to live among people and become independent, not dependent on anyone. Only he can cope with this task. Others would simply be scared of the task. The lady left the room and breathed a sigh of relief. She had not expected everything to go so smoothly. Isaac agreed to her proposal. The man asked for a large sum of money for it, but promised to do everything. Now Elizabeth could guess how he had become so rich and influential. The former gladiator knew how to run a business and find a common language with people, so he could safely return home. The girl suddenly paid attention to everything that was happening around her. It was not for nothing that this time was called the era of the heyday of the empire. Life was bustling everywhere. Ships were arriving, goods were being transported, deals were being made. In the opinion of the future princess, this country had huge prospects for development in the future. The potential had to develop, and Lisa could not stand in the way of this. Ernst needed support. Elizabeth decided that before the wedding with the prince, she had to resolve all the issues that had arisen as a result of Lisa's previous actions. There were 40 days left until the ceremony, and the first thing to do was to free Karsus. She remembered the last words of the conversation with Isaac. Then the girl warned that it was worth stopping the business with fighting dogs. After all, if the government does not support the business, then it has no future, and Prince Ernst was hostile to such amusements of the aristocracy. So, after coming to the throne, he would persecute all establishments where duels and competitions would be held. Lisa could not see how Isaac spoke to Karsus after her visit. The man emphasized that the Duke's daughter had made her choice, and it was made in favor of Prince Ernst and his noble cause. These words made no impression on Karsus. He smiled and said that soon everything would change in the empire. Everything would be turned upside down, and he would get what he wanted.